15 days into the new year, right? Today's 15th, I think.
Yep.
But we are back, and I'm back after a few months. Hannon, thank you again. Like, you don't know how much that just made my heart so happy. I have still got like 5 or 6 of these Bible studies just like fully fleshed out, so that's good. Flushed out, not fleshed out. So, where we left off, Hannon had finished Leviticus. Like, we're done with it. We're not going back over it. We are finished. And again, thank you for getting us through the Feast of the Lord, the Feast of the Lord, and their relevance to not just the Jewish people back then, but also to how they will deal with future events as well. This is really going into the final section of our study of the Exodus. Remember when we first started this, I said that we were doing the Exodus, and by that I meant we were going over the pre-Exodus stuff, where we talked about the how the Hebrews got into Egypt, how they got enslaved. Then we went over the actual Exodus itself, where we were talking about them getting to Sinai. Then we got into talking about the law, which we painstakingly went through most of the year last year. And now we are getting into the 40-year journey in the wilderness, which is pretty much what Numbers and Deuteronomy encompasses. And of course, we've done a little bit of Numbers already, because we did do Numbers chapter 6, which covers the law of the Nazirite vow. And I did a little Numbers introduction when we did that, but now I'm going to give you a lot more information. So Numbers, and I told Crystal I was going to do this joke. Y'all know why Numbers is called Numbers? Because it covers a number of things. No. Numbers is the English title of the book, and it comes from the Greek word arithmoi. Arithmoi?
Where arithmetic comes from?
Yes, that is where we get the word arithmetic from. Now, in Hebrews, the title was Bimidbar, which means in the wilderness, which makes a lot more sense. But when the Greeks got to the title, when they got the titling it, when they made the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, essentially they read the first 4 chapters and saw how it covered a census, and how later in what we would call chapter 26 also covers a census. So the Greek scholars gave it the title of arithmoi for numbers, because they were numbering. I guess they didn't bother, thinking about, the rest of it. But yeah, that's what it's called. That's why it's called Numbers, because the Greeks titled it that. The information I'm giving you tonight will also serve as a little bit of a timeline and review of kind of where we came from and where we're headed. Now, Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus were all written by Moses around 1445 BC. Around the same time the law was given to Moses at Mount Sinai, and around the time the tabernacle was built, which of course we know also the events of Genesis took place long before Moses, but the meat of Exodus and Leviticus take place in 1445 BC. Okay, but Moses did write Genesis as well. When the Hebrews left Egypt, headed toward Mount Sinai to establish themselves as a nation, and that journey began, again, it's around 1445 BC, and they left Mount Sinai when they received the law. This takes us to Numbers, which was written a little later. It was not written in 1445 BC. It was written in 1405 BC, 40 years later, toward the end of Moses' life, along with the book of Deuteronomy. However, Numbers itself is broken up into two major sections. The first section of Numbers covers chapter 1 through 14, which all take place in the second year of the Exodus, which would be 1444 BC. Then later on, the rest of the book takes place in the year 1406, 1405, when the journey of the 40-year wilderness was about to end. Now, we are not going to read chapter 1 through 4, which covers the census.
Thank
Okay?
you.
I've read, you're welcome. If you want to read it, great. I encourage you to. However, I'm going to spare the people in this room and you people online of me just droning on reading chapters 1 through 4 tonight. But what I am going to do is describe what I studied and what it's covering. So, first we need to understand that chapters 1 through 10 of Numbers covers a mere 50 days. Yes, chapters 1 through 10 of Numbers covers 50 days worth of events. These are pretty much summed up with the way Moses organized Israel. Also, the first 10 chapters aren't exactly in chronological order, so where are we to begin? Well, chapter 7 seems a pretty reasonable place to begin. Moving on from our study of the Jewish law, we come back to the story of the wilderness journey. So we're done with law, we're not covering law. At this point, the law has been given. The tabernacle, which again, remember when we studied it, it had all these, movable parts. It was essentially a giant Lego set, which, funny enough, there is now a Lego set of the tabernacle.
Is it
that we can buy.
Really?
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah. There's like this whole company that makes like Lego Bible sets.
That's awesome.
So you can buy like a whole Lego set of the tabernacle, and it comes actually with the little cloth, and you can put it on
Oh,
there.
neat.
Yeah.
Now, is it a Lego licensing or like a Lego
I'm
company-
assuming it's like one of those, made
Other
in
companies,
China,
Yeah, okay, got it.
Pakistani knockoff. But it is not Lego licensed.
Well,
Okay.
Pastor Appreciation
But
Gifts.
The tabernacle has been created. The furnishings have been created. The Levitical priests have been put into practice. Aaron has been selected as high priest, and 1 year to the day since leaving Egypt has passed. They have been at Mount Sinai for 1 year. So everything we covered was 1 year. Now let's actually read some scripture. Miss Bonetta, will you read chapter 7, just verse 1, and Bree, if you'll read chapter 9, just verse 1.
On the day Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it in all its furnishings, along with the altar and all its utensils. After he anointed and consecrated these things,
And then,
9 verse 1.
yep.
The Lord spoke to Moses in the desert of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they came out of Egypt. He said,
So, this is the second year. That's all I'm establishing here.
Okay.
that is to prove that we are in the second year. Now, we'll talk about chapter 9 later, but what it does is help establish where we are in the timeline of events. Chapter 9 is going to be the second Passover, exactly 1 year since the Hebrews were liberated from Egypt. Because remember, the whole reason that they were able to leave is because the Passover of the Lord. Then, if Kayla, will you read Exodus 40:17?
40?
Yep. Verse 17.
And it came to pass in the first month in the second year, on the first day of the month, that the tabernacle was reared up.
So this is describing the same event that's talked about in Numbers 7:1. The tabernacle was finished on the first day of the first month, meaning that is the month of Nisan, and Hannah, I hope I make you proud, meaning that it is around April of the year 1444 BC. Again, 1 year from their liberation from Egypt. And the reason I am hammering this home is because, one, I am about to be in a Christian evidence class starting on Monday, where I have had to go through for the past 3 months of reading my books how to mathematically prove that Jesus resurrected from the grave, but also, yes, but also how people love to pick apart the Bible saying, well, it's not a real history. It's telling you the actual dates right here. So, Miss Bonetta, I'm going to jump back to you since I had you read 7:1. If you'll read 7:3.
7:3. They brought as their offering before the Lord 6 covered carts and 12 oxen, a cart from every 2 leaders and an ox from each one, and presented them in front of the tabernacle.
And Bree, will you read 778?
778.
Long chapter.
On the
Wow.
on the 12th day of Ahira, on the 12th day, Ahira, son of Enan, the leader of the people of Naphtali, brought his offering.
So, now, from 7:3 until 778, wow, that's a mouthful, the leaders of the tribes were bringing offerings to the tabernacle. It is important, the importance of this is that every tribe, all 12, had representatives who brought sacrifices to the tabernacle. Essentially, all were welcome. This continued until the 12th day of the month. This takes us to chapter 9. Hannon, will you read Numbers 9, 1 through 5?
Thus the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the first month of the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, saying, Now let the sons of Israel observe the Passover at its appointed time. On the 14th day of this month, at twilight, you shall observe it as an appointed time. You shall observe it according to all its statutes and according to all its ordinances. So Moses told the sons of Israel to observe the Passover. They observed the Passover of the first month on the 14th day of the month at the twilight in the wilderness of Sinai, according to all that the Lord had commanded Moses, so that the sons of Israel did.
So then, on the 14th day of the month of Nisan, they started the celebration of Passover, the very second Passover ever. So they've come full circle. And again, it's just amazing to think that almost all the events of Exodus and everything we talked about in Leviticus is just 1 year. That's crazy. They went through a lot. Passover, of course, me and Hannon have both talked about now separately from Exodus and Leviticus, from the Feast of the Lords. Passover is combined with the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which immediately followed it. And this was a great festival celebrating the Exodus of Egypt. And since this is the second Passover, technically it is the first one actually commemorating the event of what God did. Again, just 1 year prior. Now, we're going to skip back to Numbers chapter 1.
Thought we were speaking.
Yeah, we're going to be skipping around a little bit. Sam, will you read Numbers chapter 1, verses 1 through 4?
The Lord spoke to Moses in the tent of meeting in the desert of Sinai on the first day of the second month of the second year after the Israelites came out of Egypt. He said, Take a census of the whole Israelite community by their clans and families, listing every man by name one by one. You and Aaron are to count according to their divisions all the men in Israel who are 20 years old or more and able to serve in the army. 4:2.
Yeah, read 4 also.
One man off from each tribe, each of them the head of his family, is to help you.
So, on the first day of the second month of the second year. So this is about 15 days past the second Passover. So Passover's over with now. They've celebrated it. Huzzah. God comes to Moses and Aaron at the tent of meeting, meaning the tabernacle. They are to take a census of the entire nation of Israel. The event, again, that this whole book was named by the Greeks for. So this is the census. But why? The census had a militaristic reason. All males 20 years old were to be registered. The word take a census is not the first time this has happened. Exodus 30 talks about taking a census for tax contribution purposes. However, the word here was the word described in Far East traditions of lift up the heads, which was a phrase used in military conscription. I'm proud I got that word right. This was to enlist all the able-bodied men into military service for the nation of Israel. This is something that still technically Israel does today. Since the Declaration of Independence of Israel in 1948, Israel has a standing law of mandatory military conscription. Since 1948, once you turn 18, you serve a bare minimum of 2 years and 8 months service in Israel, if you live in Israel and you are an Israeli. Also, once you are discharged from service, you are able to be called by the Israeli government for service for emergency reasons until the age of 40.
Like the National Guard.
Yes. So, what was the result of this census? 603,550 men, 20 years old. And now, of course, it was older, but I'm sure there was an age cutoff. I did not get that out of this. But that is a little over 500,000 soldiers. Now, with that being said, on a side note, there is a second census that is recalled in Numbers 26. We get different numbers there, and we're going to get to that later because there's a reason that a second census was taken. Also, FYI, Numbers 31:14. Remember when we talked about Moses being completely overwhelmed because he was essentially taking all of these complaints from the Hebrews and he was burdening all that shoulder on himself, and his father-in-law Jethro came to him and said, hey, maybe you should appoint leaders over the people, leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, and leaders of 10s. Well, in Numbers 31:14, it specifically talks about how the leaders of thousands and leaders of hundreds, now they're mentioned in a negative way because they've done something bad, and again, we'll get there, but it is talking about them being military leaders. So your leaders of thousands and leaders of hundreds, they were commanders of these now 600 plus 1,000 men. That makes sense. Okay. This leads us to chapter 2. Emma, will you read Numbers chapter 2, verses 1 and 2?
And the Lord spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, Every man of the children of Israel shall pitch by his own standard with the ensign of their father's house. Far off about the tabernacle of the congregation shall they pitch.
Now, the census instructions were given. The next part was an organizational system for a way to be camped and marched on the way they were traveling. How many of y'all thought, like I did until I really started studying this, that when they were just wandering through the wilderness, they were just walking? Okay, good. I'm not the only one. No, they had a specific way of doing it. So, this is where I have to draw y'all a very bad picture. And I love the CSB for this because it actually gives a nice, beautiful illustration. If you can see it, this is what it looks like.
Right here.
But I'll draw it. So, you had the tabernacle in the middle. You had a Levite clan, a Levite clan, a Levite clan, because remember there were technically three. And you had Moses and Aaron who camped here. All around them, though, was each one of the tribes that went like that. To keep the tribes together, but also to give them protection when they were stopped. With the tabernacle, God being at the center. See, now I get some bazingas. So, key point to this, the tabernacle was in the middle. Each tribe formed a squarish-like formation around the tabernacle and around the Levites and around the leaders. This formation allowed for protection when they were camped, but it also allowed the separation of the tribes to keep families together and a sense of organization. Ironically enough, this type of camp was adopted after this by Ramses II and other Gentile nations.
It's almost like
When they camped, they saw it and said, wow, look at how they do it. We're going to do it like them. Because we always read in the Old Testament where the Israelites look at other nations and say, wow, they're doing something awesome. Well, in this case, we get Gentile nations looking at Israel and saying, that's a good idea. So that was something that happened. Toward the middle, you had Aaron, Moses, and the ordained priests camped around the door of the tabernacle, which was east. Surrounding the north, south, west of the tabernacle, and in the middle of the camp is where the Levitical tribes were. So this was east. The Levitical tribes that we haven't really talked about, you had the Gershonites, the Merarites, and the Cohenites, which I want you to keep that name in mind for something later tonight. Were all Levites like Aaron, but Aaron and his direct sons were the only ones who were allowed to serve as the sacrificial ritual priests. The Gershonites would be responsible for carrying the curtains of the tabernacle. The Maronites were responsible for the poles and tent pegs. The Cohenites, though, which were the second favored after Aaron's family, they were responsible for carrying the sacred vessels such as the giant menorah, altars, and all of those items. They were all counted as well, the Levites, from 0 to 1 month old, there were 22,000. From 30 to 50, there were 8,580. And when they were on the march, when they were on the move, they marched in this type of fashion. And then you had the tabernacle in the middle, the Levites, and then more tribes. They marched in pretty much a military-like style, okay, like if they were battalions. And they marched in this order: Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Reuben, Simeon, Gad, the Levites, the tabernacle items, Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. That's the order. And FYI, we're going to stop right here tonight because I feel like that's enough information to blow our minds with that. But what I want to add is I mentioned one particular Levite tribe called the
Korah?
The Kohathites, okay, they come from Aaron's son Kohath, which name is also translated to Kohanim, which is where the English last name Cohen comes from, which might sound familiar because Brad is Cohen.
Yeah.
So this may be where Brad's
Lineage.
comes from the Kohathites, which were the ones who would carry the sacred vessels. So, yeah, that's what I got. That's our little introduction to Numbers. Kind of short and sweet, but I've got more, trust me, just not
I
tonight.
hate he wasn't here tonight.
Yeah, that's why I was hoping he'd be here. I was like,
Isn't Brad from the tribe of Benjamin? I remember him saying something about Brad. I might be wrong. I might be thinking something else. But I thought he was from the tribe of Benjamin.
but that may be where his last name comes from, though.
Oh,
Yeah. But then again, we don't really have like you know, I don't think they can really like keep track of like. I mean, I don't know. Like I don't know how they do that today.
Would something like Ancestry be able to take you
yeah.
back
They,
to the
they
tribe you're
still
from?
keep track.
I don't know.
And I guess it does get diluted.
Maybe, but I just
because-
like because when I started researching it though, that when I started googling like all the name and stuff though, they were like, yeah, that's where like that name comes from because like because Kohan became Ko with a K, Cohen, and then like the more like English name of it is Cohen, Cohen. I just thought that was kind of so he may be. I don't know. I know Jess mentioned it to me like once or twice before, and then I was like, really? And then as I was reading, I was like, wait a minute, Jess has told me this before. But yeah, so biggest thing though, they numbered themselves so that, you know, they took the census because again, as, of course we know the story, how it goes, but for all intents and purposes, they were heading toward the promised land. They were going to need their army. They had not yet made the boo-boos that they are going to make in just a few short lessons.
They need structure.
So they needed structure. They needed their military ready. So they had it. They had their marching organization. They had everything they needed, and they were preparing to take off. Which next week is what we'll get into. And then that's why in chapter 26 there's another census because a lot of boo-boos were made along the way. Questions? All right. Well, guys, it's nice to see y'all again. Happy New Year. Thank y'all for growing the Guardians of Christ online and the prayer requests y'all have been asking and all your wonderful comments over the past couple of weeks. We hope you enjoy these lessons. If you have not joined us up till now, looking at this Bible study of, the Exodus, again, you can start now because, again, Numbers is kind of a new look into it, but you did miss some stuff along the way. But we hope you have a wonderful, wonderful week. If there's anything we can be praying for you about, please feel free to comment down below on this video or reach out to me. I am Edward James Grissett on Facebook. And you can, if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to like and subscribe to our channel. We are trying to grow it for 2026. And if you need to reach us personally, you can always reach us at guardiansofchristministries@gmail.com. God bless and have a wonderful week.